Well then, this was an unplanned video. Nottingham Forest have announced that Morgan Gibbs-White has signed a new contract until 2028. Wow. The last 2 weeks have been very chaotic and something we would have absolutely have wanted to try and avoid happening this summer transfer window. Our star asset, our biggest player the last few seasons, potentially leaving without us really having much of a say. Of course, it all started with Tottenham activating his £60 million release clause that nobody to the public knew about. And before we knew it, he was meant to be joining Spurs. He could have even been going the very next day. Medical was booked, deal was agreed, it was a formality. But the next day, instead of a medical, we saw Forest threaten legal action about Tottenham's approach to the player, claiming it was breaching confidentiality. So the last 2 weeks, it's been radio silence to people that aren't in the know-how of what's going on. We've just had no clue. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go at the club? Everyone was thinking it's just a matter of time that we're going to see Gibbs-White leave. But here we are, 2 weeks later, off the back of our third pre-season friendly and the second one that Gibbs-White's featured in. There was speculation he's not gone to the Portugal training camp immediately because he's going to leave, even though it was clearly for a family matter. Well, no, it was for a family matter because he signed a new contract. A new record-breaking contract, by the way, and that does beg the question, how much is he now being paid? And that's probably the reason why he's staying at the club. Now, my honest opinion on this is that I'm buzzing that the fact that we're keeping Morgan Gibbs-White as a player, like ignoring how it's happened, as a player, of course you want to keep Gibbs-White around. Why wouldn't you? But I do think there'll be quite a lot of fans that are still going to find it fairly hard to move on from this. I think some probably will and say, okay, well, he's on a new deal, he's ours now, let's just move past this. And that's what I'd like to be able to do. And so long as he gives his all, you know, I'm going to back him. I will do, because he's our player and he's a top player. And whether we just see him go next summer instead or even in the January window, I mean, yes, that's still a possibility, but I do think if we're going to do this when a club has played a release clause, which normally means it is just a formality, like surely that's it when a release clause is paid. It's not a straightforward transaction now. And yet he's still here. He's still going to be ours, technically, on paper, until 2028. So this is incredible. The fact that we've managed to do this, and you know, you could say, oh, it's just down to money, that's the only reason why he stayed. But really, whatever he's being paid by Forest now to stay, I'm sure Tottenham could have offered him the same, if not more, you know. So I don't really entirely buy that. Like, if he really didn't want to be at the club and he wanted to go to Spurs, he could have done. And he could have just said, well, Spurs can offer him more, or the same. So the fact that he chose to stay at Forest and get an increase, clearly, in terms of what he's being paid, then, you know, that's great. That clearly means that he must be committed to some point to stay to the club. Otherwise, he wouldn't have signed that deal. So I do like to think that this is a honest and truthful decision from Gibbs-White to stay at the club because he truly wants to. And I think it is. But I do understand why a lot probably will still look at it and think, well, you know, there's no coming back from that, you know. You've kind of lost trust in me. And that's going to be difficult for him to overcome. I think maybe for some it might be quite easy if he just starts performing well. But I can see why some might look at this and just think, well, he's blown it, you know, I'm not going to be able to get over this, I'm not going to forgive him, I'd rather he just leave. And I think that's what we all thought was going to happen. Like, I don't think there was any way back. And him signing a new deal, I mean, yeah, okay, that's good, but is it just halting the inevitable? You know, I don't really want to think of it like that. And the fact that he's going to be at ours at least next season is fantastic, and I'm very, very happy about that. But regardless, he's gone from, you know, absolute hero status, worshipped by so many people at Forest, to probably still that, but some people are going to be a bit indifferent now. I just don't see how you can't, when for 2 weeks at least we were led to believe that he wanted to leave the club. I don't think you can just think, because he's signed a new deal, that 100% of him is now committed. I think it's still kind of hard to ignore what's happened the last 2 weeks. I just hope we can move on from that though, and we don't just hold a grudge and think if Gibbs-White, you know, has a couple of off games next season, we think, well, he doesn't want to be here. You know, Gibbs-White last season had a few games where he maybe wasn't as effective as some, And for all we know, he didn't want to be at the club last season, and this is probably why, if those reports of him wanting to leave a year ago because he didn't want to sign a new contract then, that's probably why it's going to be hard to move on from this, because he apparently didn't want to be here or didn't want to sign a new deal from about a year ago. So if that's true, then you really can't trust him still. But regardless, he signed a new contract. He's going to be ours at least until January, but I find it very hard to believe that we'll let him go in a January transfer window if we're going to give him a new contract off the back of a release clause being paid. So if he's going to go, it'll surely be in a summer transfer window. And yeah, I think we're going to get at least one more season out of him quite clearly. And depending on how we go next season, could be more. If we have a worse season, then you probably could say if a good offer came in, well, yeah, why wouldn't you leave? If we do fall off and Man City come calling again, then it probably makes more sense. But I think so long as we're in Europe, it's going to be like, come on Morgan, just stay around. So yeah, lots of things that you can say about this subject. This is my take. Very happy that we're keeping Gibbs-White. Of course I am, but I am, like probably most, a little bit like, let's just hope this doesn't be a temporary fix, or that he is fully committed. And I like to think that he is, because he has signed a new contract ultimately. So please let me know your thoughts in the comments on this. This is a very unplanned video for this week, but yeah, it's a busy time of year. It's going to be a busy season, so plenty of videos coming, of course. So please keep liking, keep subscribing to Rads. Let's try and get to 7K as soon as possible. That would be fantastic too. And yeah, thanks for watching. Get your comments in, and up the Reds.